Let me ask you something. And don't shout out an answer just yet. If a coworker stood up in a meeting, confused Bob with Shirley, claimed credit for a number of things that just never happened, repeated conspiracy theories everyone else already knew were false, and then wrapped it all up in threats and grudges, we wouldn't think that person was okay, right? Would you feel assured listening to this person? Would you think, wow, this guy's really got it together? Yeah, no. You'd call human resources, or maybe just go straight for the guy with the butterfly net. But this week, that coworker was the president of the United States, standing on a global stage in Davos, Switzerland, in front of world leaders and economists and diplomats and heads of state. And what he delivered sure wasn't policy. What he delivered to the world was a lot of things, but leadership wasn't one of them. It was confusion, grievance, fantasy, and threat wrapped together so tightly that even professional diplomats were not sure where one ended and the next one started. Was it ridiculous? Yep. Was it embarrassing? 100%. Was it yet another warning? You bet your life. Hello and welcome to another supplemental installment of Back Porch Files from your neighbor on the left, the podcast about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, your host, and today we're going to be talking about Trump's speech at Davos, Switzerland. Davos isn't supposed to be exciting. That's the first thing to understand. It's not a rally. It's not a debate stage. It's not a place where you're supposed to be giving applause lines or zingers. Davos is where leaders speak in measured, careful language because everyone in the room understands that words have consequences. Well, almost everyone. Past presidents, Republican and Democrat alike, treated Davos like what it is, a place where you reassure allies, signal stability, and maybe, most critically, you project competence. You don't go freestyle. You don't go there to air grievances. And you definitely don't go there to make stuff up about events everyone already knows about. Which is why Trump's speech landed like a fire alarm in a library. From the opening minutes, it was clear that this was not going to be a focused address. It was a stream, a meandering, looping monologue where facts and boasts and complaints and threats blended together with little regard for accuracy or relevance. And yes, Trump has always exaggerated. That is not new. What is new is how unanchored this speech felt, how little connection there was between topic and topic, between cause and effect, or to any rational version of reality. This was not confidence. This was drift. Trump opened by declaring inflation defeated, not reduced, not easing, defeated. That's the kind of language you use when you don't want follow-up questions. It's also the kind of language you'd expect if inflation was actually getting better. It isn't, and we are all painfully aware of that fact. Inflation isn't defeated. Americans know it, they feel it, and they live it. You don't need a CPI report to know whether groceries are cheaper. All you need is your receipt. When a leader insists a problem is solved while people are actively struggling with it, that is not optimism. That is denial. Well, at this point, we're hoping it's denial and not just simply delusion. Be honest. Is anyone actually sure? He followed that with claims of the fastest economic turnaround in history, a phrase so broad and unsupported, it might as well have been written in glitter. And this is where we need to slow down and explain why this matters. Because exaggeration becomes dangerous when it replaces reality entirely. See, if you believe or pretend to believe that the economy is perfect, you stop addressing the problems that remain. You stop planning, you stop adjusting, you start governing based on a fantasy version of the country. And governing from fantasy is the absolute last thing we need right now. This wasn't just spin, it was disconnection. Then came Greenland. This is the moment that snapped international attention into focus. Trump told the room that the U.S. already had Greenland and gave it back to Denmark. That did not happen. Not technically, not legally, not historically, not even accidentally, not sort of, not in other words. It simply did not ever happen. The United States has never owned Greenland. Ever. But what made this moment especially unsettling wasn't just that it was false, it was how confidently false it was. No hesitation, no correction, no awareness that what he was saying might be controversial, let alone totally incorrect. And then, as multiple reporters confirmed, he began mixing up Greenland and Iceland. Now, let's be clear. This isn't a trivia question. This isn't confusing two senators or mispronouncing a name. This is confusing two different countries while discussing territorial control and geopolitical leverage. This is misnaming the country, several times, that he has been obsessed with recently. That's not cute. That's not funny. That's concerning. And then came the threat. He told Denmark, politely but unmistakably, that they could say yes to U.S. interests and America would be appreciative. Or they could say no and America would remember. That is not diplomacy. That's the not-so-subtle line of a mob boss leaning across a table and smiling while sharpening a knife that you might see in a Scorsese film. And when that language comes from someone already showing signs of confusion, that's not considered strength. That's considered volatility. And then we got NATO again. Trump repeated the claim that the U.S. pays 100% of NATO costs. This lie has been debunked so many times it's almost impressive that he still believes it or pretends to. NATO does not work like that. It never has. And here's why this matters. When a president lies about alliances, it signals to those allies that commitments are conditional at best, and to adversaries that fractures can be exploited. Words shape perception. Perception shapes behavior. Trump's words suggested something deeply unsettling, that alliances exist only as long as he personally feels respected. And let's be frank, that is never going to happen, particularly not on the world stage. More importantly, that's not how global security works. That's how things unravel. Then he pivoted to wind energy. Again, Trump claimed China makes windmills but doesn't use them at all. That is false. China leads the world in wind power capacity. This is public knowledge, vastly documented, rationally indisputable. And yet Trump keeps repeating the claim. Why? Because it's not about policy, it's about fixation. Windmills, for whatever reason, have become a symbolic enemy for him. Something he returns to over and over and over, regardless of the context of whatever else he's supposed to be talking about. And fixation is another warning sign. Confident, capable leaders with a strong grasp of reality adapt. They can absorb new information. They move on to other things. Leaders losing that grip repeat the same stories, the same claims, the same grievances, even after being corrected multiple times. Then, unbelievably, he brought up the 2020 election. Again, at Davos, in front of the world, he repeated the claim that the 2020 election was rigged. This isn't just false at this point. This is dangerous, because a president who cannot accept verified reality is a president who shouldn't be trusted to act rationally when reality becomes inconvenient or unpopular. Democracy depends on shared facts, actual proven facts, and Trump keeps rejecting them. Throughout the speech, he drifted. He jumped topics mid-sentence, he repeated phrases, he circled back to grievances that were already talked about. Observers noted how long it took him to actually land points and how often he seemed to lose the thread of whatever it was he was aiming for. This did not appear sharp. It did not appear disciplined. It was just this side of rambling free association. And when this kind of delivery happens once, you shrug. You say, well, whatever. When it happens repeatedly, across venues, across months, across years, you have to start asking harder questions. At best, this speech made the United States look unserious. At worst, it made us look unpredictable. And unpredictability at the top of the world's most powerful military is not a feature. It is a liability. This wasn't just a bad day. This was a pattern on full display for the world. If this were satire, it would be hilarious. As reality, it's terrifying. And if the speech itself didn't make you uncomfortable, then the talk from the right-leaning media and most of the GOP should. Even with another grand example of buffoonery, so many went in front of cameras and otherwise on the record to say how wonderful the speech was, how powerful. How in the world do any of them expect to be taken seriously? The most unsettling part of the Davos speech wasn't any single lie. It was the accumulation, the confusion, the repetition, the grievance, the threats, the detachment from facts. Taken together, they paint a picture that's impossible to ignore. This is not normal. This is not healthy. And I dare anyone to offer me an explanation why, after watching this, we should feel safe. History doesn't just judge outcomes, it judges warnings ignored. Davos wasn't a scandal, it was a signal. And the question isn't whether Trump embarrassed the United States. He did. He most certainly did. The question is whether we're willing to admit that this moment revealed something before the consequences become irreversible. Even for the folks who are dire Trump supporters, who believe in whatever he says his policies are and think he's doing a wonderful job, how can you watch this speech and not think something is wrong? When the man at the top can't stay tethered to reality, everyone else eventually pays the price. And the bill always comes due. Big thanks to everyone who took the time to download and listen to this installment of Back Porch Files from your neighbor on the left. I want to thank you wholeheartedly and ask you to please reach out, give your thoughts and your opinions and your questions to the podcast. You can do so by using any of the social media platforms that the podcast employs. The links to all of those are on the Linktree page, and the address of the Linktree page is in the podcast episode description. You can also contact the podcast via email. The email address is neighboroutleftpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back Tuesday of next week with another full episode. So until then, stay engaged, stay kind, and have the kind of week you'd wish for others.